Hello, everyone joining us from home. Welcome to Rebel Roundup, our daily news and opinion live stream where we give you an hour, sometimes plus, of unfiltered news and opinions as they happen, sometimes quite literally on air. I am hosting and filling in today, and I think also tomorrow, for our editor in chief, Sheila Gunn Reid. I'm Tamara Ugolini, and I'm joined by my friend and colleague, our British Columbia correspondent, Drea Humphrey. How are you doing, Drea?
I'm doing good. I just got back from our Rebel cruise and it was my first Rebel vacation, so I'm great. It was amazing. Anybody thinking of doing it, you got to try it. Going on vacation with like-minded people, Tamara, as you probably know, since you've been on it, is
Mhm.
priceless. It was so fun.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I went on the Caribbean cruise
Hmm.
last year, and it's always nice to meet and mingle with people in person. And you hear obviously support, and I'm recognized almost everywhere that I go. It seems these days,
Yeah.
but it's so nice just to have those more in-depth conversations than what you would get even just on our live stream, which is a great time for me to let our viewers know that we're streaming on a couple different platforms. So we are on YouTube, Rumble, and X. And on YouTube and Rumble, you can give us what is called either a Rumble rant or a super chat. On YouTube, you can also give us like a post live stream super thanks if you're tuning in later and appreciate the stream. And so for $5 or more donation, you can have your comment or a tip or just little tidbit that you'd like to reach a broader audience read by us on air. So we appreciate always those little bits here and there really help to keep our journalistic endeavors afloat. And so if you have a little bit of extra kicking around and you want to pitch in, we are always very appreciative of that. And of course, as I mentioned, we'll read your comment on air. So it's a great way for us to keep that conversation going, get some diverse opinions, right? We always hear that we have to hear all opinions. So let your opinion be heard and let us know what you're thinking about the topics as we run through them. Today, we're going to get to EB,
Ugh.
Premier of British Columbia, blaming anti vaxxers for a measles outbreak. Refugees heading to New Brunswick, which might take some of the heat off of Ontario, but I'm not really sure. And of course, Drea, a story that you've been following closely and have actually launched a campaign about, which is the BC ferries and their China contracts. So,
Mhm.
first and foremost, though, I think we should hit the story that you did yesterday, went out, that the ostrich farm in
Yes.
British Columbia has had another win in court. Tell us about this.
Well, I was joking that now anytime anyone sees me, they're like, how are the ostriches? If I put up a different report, people in the comments are like, just tell us about the ostriches. So the good news is not only are they still alive by, I say, the grace of God and grit of man, they've had another little miracle. So the farmers were granted an emergency stay, which means that these 400 healthy ostriches who have not had any sign of sickness or illness for over 5 months now, yet the Canadian Food Inspection Agency says they're going to come call them anyways. Well, it means that they are safe for now, pending an appeal, which will be taking place in Ottawa next month. So, of course, I'll be covering that as well. But if anybody doesn't know this story, I'll just run you through the quick little miracles because as stressful as it has been for the Universal Ostrich Farms, which is located in rural Edgewood, BC, these birds who are not poultry, they're not used for food consumption, they're actually used for antibody therapeutic research. Go figure. And the research, so the farmers and the scientists say actually neutralize COVID-19. And then they claim that they could do the exact same thing. If these birds had avian flu, then that means they can do it for the avian flu. But that's being shut down by the state. But first, the day before the original call was supposed to happen, they got an emergency injunction that temporarily saved the birds. Then they lost. They lost. The federal court said, no, they can continue because it's a policy issue. The policy says they can call these animals even if they're healthy, and it makes no sense. But then after that, the local district did the right thing. We don't see that with politicians where they unanimously voted to not have any of these carcasses, these ostrich carcasses, as the state was planning to dispose of them at their landfills unless they test to see if these birds are sick or anything, which is what the farmers have been asking for. And instead, the CFIA refuses to test them and says, by the way, farmers, if you test them, if you go test to prove that they are immune, like you say you are, you could go to jail and also receive a crazy fine. So it's just a crazy story we've been following closely, and so happy to report there's another win for now. And the public pushback has been
Hmm.
immense, including internationally, with Secretary of State, Health Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr. and head of Medicare, Dr. Oz, and even Canada's only avian flu case, the so-called 13, well, she's 14 now, but the 13-year-old girl that the mainstream media, every time the state is culling millions of birds and anybody says anything about it, they always talk about this girl. Well, even she made her way down to the farm, said, stop using me. She showed herself for the first time. She said, this is ridiculous. I have antibodies. They're doing testing on me. Why are we not testing these birds to see, how we can further science?
Yeah, and I think that a great point in all of this is that local government, that I
Mhm.
believe people have more of a voice
Yeah.
at the table, in these discussions, and I think have a bit more pull and sway. But for me, the nail in the coffin of that one is that, well, if these birds need to be culled and there's some sort of like super spreader risk, then doesn't that make them a biohazard? And so if we're
Mhm.
just sending them off to this local landfill, well, of course they don't want them, because shouldn't they be disposed of properly in a way that
Yeah.
doesn't risk contaminating anything else? I mean, if the CIA, you can't have your cake and eat it too, right? Are
Yeah.
they this big risk? And if so, they need to be disposed of properly, or aren't they? And then why are they being culled? And so I think that local government started to see kind of the discrepancy there that didn't make logical sense.
Mhm.
And I believe that was really pivotal in preserving the ostriches, as they have been now for, I don't even know, a couple months since the original call order.
It was December the original
Yeah.
call order was placed. And you're absolutely right. They mentioned that kind of logic, but they also cried. A lot of them cried when they did the unanimous vote, which shows that, their heart is in this, like much of the people across Canada and
Yeah.
internationally too. So quite the story. We follow it closely at savetheostriches.com. We even have an email campaign where in one click you can respectfully demand that the CFIA stop wasting your tax dollars to, take these farmers to court, give us back our freedom to farm, freedom for food, and
Oh, look at
freedom,
them.
freedom. I know they're so cute. Freedom of science. What I love about this, just real quick, is that they've had protesters come and stay in camp there for months now, sort of proving no one's getting sick. Everyone can see they're healthy. Like this is just a charade. But I love that there is this strong community that was, pro trucker convoy, against vaccine mandates. And they're there now saying, like most of them are saying, we need them, let them do the science. So it's just funny. Yeah.
Yeah, all around. And again, just when you use your logic and rational brain, like it doesn't make sense,
No.
what the feds are trying to do here. But in other news, not very much of what the feds do does make sense. We have this piece from the Globe and Mail where the Federal Infrastructure Bank provided $1 billion in
Mhm.
financing for British Columbia ferries to purchase 4 new Chinese made ships.
Yeah.
And this ties in with the campaign that you have also launched, Drea. So I hate to keep putting the onus on you, but once
Yeah.
again, tell us what's going on here.
You know what? BC needs a lot of help. We need a lot of
Yeah.
coverage. So I'm happy to talk about BC. But for those of you who don't know, I'm sure you all recall, Mark Carney's, Canada First promises during the campaign, which were amplified by Premier of British Columbia, David Eby, with the elbows up, and you saw the elbows up dancing they were doing and things like that. Well, here we have this huge test of if any of that was real. And we are selling out to the CCP, to communist China, for tons of jobs, steel worker, when our steel industry is getting hit with 50% tariffs from the big bad US that they've, been taunting over us like that was what matters the most. So here we are, 4 major vessels about to be contracted to CCP. It was announced a couple of months ago. And there was a lot of pressure, not just pressure on British Columbia's Minister of Transport, Mike Farnworth, to say, hey, you have some ability to intervene. He's claiming, we're independent. Because it used to be a crown corporation, and in 2017 it switched over, but the public funds are all there on all sides, but also federally. So Chrystia Freeland wrote this letter, with all this pressure on their ministry to do something like stop their $36 million subsidy that they give BC Ferries. So she wrote this letter, and of course the mainstream media ran with it. But if you look at this article we're talking about here, it shows that she completely left out how convenient the 1 billion, I think it's $1 billion low interest contract. Here we are. Sorry, I lost my spot. You might be able to read it if you have it up. But the $1 billion loan that our bank is giving the BC Ferries. So that's definitely something that could have been done and also should have been mentioned. Not only that, well, what about tariffs? You could say, well, you know what? If you go ahead with this, there's going to be tariffs on Chinese steel coming through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So much for the elbows up rhetoric that we heard and have continued to hear so much about. I think that you were one of the first on this story, and now you can see that the Globe and Mail is running with it, and other mainstream media news outlets.
Well, there were some other, like Rob Shaw with Check News. He did a really good job at sort of letting people know initially. He did a really good job at that. But, I've been covering it. People are concerned. I interviewed our, critic to transportation, Harman Bangu, who raised a really good issue of concern of national security as well, and points out that no, the BC Ferries isn't entirely independent because their board is just former NDPers. So, I mean, we have a lot of ability to kind of put that pressure on. But yeah, and what's sad is people are kind of stranded. There's not a whole lot of options. This is a huge, major transport for ferries. I just learned that in the Lower Mainland in Vancouver, there is the option to go, I believe, straight to Nanaimo, and it's Hello Ferry. But, there's a lot of, we don't have much options but to continue on to that. And if there is a safety concern, who knows what that's going to look like.
Well, I'm pretty sure it was Justin Trudeau who told us that diversity is our strength. So let's diversify the BC Ferry offerings and start to reward Canada instead of China.
Exactly.
All right, moving along, we have a post here, from Grant Woods, that will just show where his YouTube channel, which was originally terminated by YouTube without warning, which is something we have to constantly be careful of, especially, criticizing or contrasting certain mainstream media narratives. And this will especially be true later in the stream when we get into the measles stuff. We have to be careful the way that we word things and not to contradict local health authorities. So we'll chat more about that later on in the stream. But yeah, the YouTube is has, I was saying it yesterday on the stream, loosened their censorious noose ever so slightly. But that's not to say that it won't rear its ugly head again in the future. And obviously, they're still taking arbitrary measures of censorship and interference into various YouTubers and their channels. So Grant Woods had his channel terminated and then reinstated after Aaron Gunn, the newly elected MP in British Columbia, North Island Powell River riding, he contacted YouTube on Grant's behalf. And, it's really showing that, and I'm sure Aaron Gunn, with his documentaries and the work that he's done, especially on the homelessness, the drug problem, the crime, the chaos in Vancouver, he's no stranger to these policies and how quickly and arbitrarily YouTube can shut your channel down. And so he had the right contacts to be able to get that back reinstated. And now it has been reinstated with, as you read through the thread, no real answers as to why it was originally terminated and subsequently why it was then reinstated, other than like, hey, this doesn't make any sense. Can you explain yourself? No, we can't. Okay, we're going to reinstate it, is basically what I'm gathering from the whole thing.
Well, the claim that he got is he even got in contact before this happened with an agent, which is very difficult to do,
Mm-hmm.
especially if your channel isn't huge. And the agent confirmed that basically the channel was taken down for spam, scam, and deceptive practices. And the other thing is, when you think of cancel culture, there are people who do this. That I've had that where people are trying to get your video down, and so they complain about something. It what's taken down arbitrarily. Aaron Gunn, the MP, as you said, who's utilized YouTube in many ways to wake up society on important issues like our drug crisis and things like that. He's done great documentaries, and now he's an MP. As you said, he happens to be a friend of this individual as well, and he has a stake in the games of making sure that YouTube remains at least somewhat free. And what was the time frame here? Here it is. In less than 2 hours after MP Gunn sent that out, he received this email saying that the channel was indeed wrongfully terminated and was not, in fact, a purveyor of spam, scam, and deceptive practices. So 100% they took it down for no reason. And it just shows it's nice to have some, politicians elected who are willing to go on into these areas of censorship that have dominated. And I want to point out, because many people who have been following us know that Rebel News was demonetized for telling the truth about
Yeah.
many things when you were not allowed to. And so for years, we were demonetized and punished by YouTube for doing that significantly, considering we don't take a penny from the federal government, like 95% of the news. And so we all saw when Mark Zuckerberg started pretending to be, I don't know, conservative and, wearing gold chains, and went through that phase and was like, yeah, I'm not going to censor anybody. But quietly, YouTube made that switch too. They didn't announce it, but we, as Rebel News, noticed that, shortly after, Trump was elected, all of a sudden YouTube's being more lenient in this areas, but it's far from perfect. So still support our friends at Rumble News, or at Rumble, please, if you care about free speech.
Exactly. Yeah. Because, like I said, there's nothing in place to prevent this from happening
Yeah.
again. The next round of state sanctioned and much needed censorship to entice and to coerce the population to comply with whatever their preferred edicts of the day may be. So while we're okay and treading a little less lightly now on YouTube, we still do have to be cautious with the
Yeah.
way we word things, especially when it comes to supposed medical misinformation, which is a lot of my beat. And so
Yeah.
I will see what happens into the future, but I don't hold my breath that they will not try to do this again as
Well,
heavily as it was done during COVID.
yes, and like you said, we have to self-censor on this live
Yes.
stream. But also, I just want to say they really censor the gender ideology discussion as well. So they've been a little bit more lenient there too.
They did after the Tavistock clinic. I think that was I think the timing coincided with the closure of the Tavistock clinic in the UK and
Mhm.
some of those studies that were coming out kind of around that time as well. YouTube just randomly dropped their DEI gender ideology clauses from their policies. And so now you can criticize gender identity nonsense, but then there's still some, again, it's so loosely and ambiguously worded that
Yeah.
you're not really sure. So you have to kind of tiptoe, but under their hate speech stuff. So criticizing, you have, anyway,
A protected person,
protected groups. That's
which is
right.
which is everybody but white middle-aged men,
And
basically.
anybody who wants to keep their medical information private and
Yeah.
confidential, that's
Yeah.
not a protected group.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's hit a quick ad break because we're going to come back and chat some drug issues and homelessness and the crime and chaos that are descending on Canadian streets.
Tired of supporting woke coffee companies that hate your values? Tired of drinking coffee that comes with the burnt, bitter taste of communism? Switch to fresh roasted, specialty coffee from a family-owned company built on faith, family, and freedom. Skip the shipping. Get free coffee and some cash for gas, groceries, and ammo by becoming a Resistance Coffee Outpost today.
Canadians know the national anthem. They stand in silence to remember those who died for this country. But not every Canadian knows their rights and freedoms. The Freedom Passport will change that. It looks and feels like a Canadian passport, but contains the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms in a portable, easy-to-read format. The Freedom Passport. Order one for yourself and for all the freedom lovers that you love at freedompassport.ca.
All right, this is a crazy story also out of British Columbia, where a Nanaimo mom is sharing these absolutely disturbing drug use info, I would call them promotion
Yeah.
cards that were distributed at her child's school event.
A
Um,
pride event.
Of course, of course. The event was held at the Departure Bay Park, where a number of organizations had booths, and one booth, the AIDS Vancouver Island booth, stacked these information cards about using drugs such as methamphetamine, ecstasy, and cocaine. And then there's a video here included, and I note that around the 30-second mark is when they start zooming in and showing these cards. I don't know
Yeah,
if we could just maybe play.
I actually cropped it. I did a shorter one.
Attending this past Tuesday.
Oh, we got it on. There you
Always start on the lowest end and work your way up until you find your dose.
go.
It was
Wow.
organized by the secondary schools Gay Straight Alliance clubs and sponsored by teacher volunteers.
It was inclusive and happy and fun and safe.
It was held at Departure Bay Park with a number of organizations having booths. Taylor was
Safe.
dismayed to see the AVI or AIDS Vancouver Island booth stacked with these information cards about using drugs such as meth, ecstasy, and cocaine.
This is not harm reduction. This is the proliferation of harm. If you're literally handing out materials that describe in great detail how to do drugs to elementary school children, I mean, it's shocking.
Ruth Taylor is laying out the cards.
Yeah, that is, I mean, a broken clock is right twice a day. I would expect nothing less at some of these deviant celebrations. And so, yeah, the mom is bang on that this is promoting drug use and to elementary school children. I mean, not that it would be any better if they were high school,
Yeah.
but that is just craziness that we are here, that anyone thought that was appropriate. And no one spoke up actually at the event to say, hey, wait a minute, maybe we should not be displaying drug use promotional materials to children.
Well, she spoke up and she tried telling the adults at the table, and according to her, like, they were just not really, like, having it. They didn't really see what she was talking about. The school district has since come out and said, oh, sorry, we didn't know the materials are going to be here. That mom brought her 10-year-old to this event organized by the Gay Straight Alliance clubs and sponsored by teacher volunteers. So how many people walked by that table? Not to mention, was it teacher volunteers standing there at that table? She just says the adults at the table. I mean, this is sick. And it reminds me that in Nanaimo, this is the same place where they had the crack pipe vending machines outside of the hospital. There's a real homelessness issue there. I mean, there is in lots of places. And here they are giving out free crack pipes outside of the hospital, to the point that drug addicts are going in, bugging the nurses, saying, hey, you're out of the crack pipes and I need to sell it. So can I get that back, please? Now we have these colorful, I mean, those pamphlets, the detail put into those pamphlets of meth and cocaine, I mean, is attractive to a 10-year-old and up. And in British Columbia, the #1 killer is overdoses for 10-year-olds. This is
Wow.
sick. This is disgusting. I mean, there should be, criminal charges, in my opinion, laid on something like this. It's just so shocking. But again, not surprising, like you said, when it's at an event already targeting kids with inappropriate stuff to begin with, and when it's in British Columbia and Nanaimo.
Yeah, the British Columbia was really the pioneer in this idea of harm reduction
Yeah.
and safe supply over the last 20 plus years, and we've seen nothing but failure and more harm and less safety. So, at what point do we throw in the white flag and say, "Hey, wait a minute, this isn't working, and we need to change of course"? I mean, I just pulled up this. I think it's from the '90s, early '90s, mid '90s. This commercial. This is the kind of thing that we used to tell children about drugs. If we could just play this quick
Yeah.
30-second ad.
Doing drugs does? Okay, last time.
Oh, yeah. I remember this.
This is your
Yeah.
brain. This is drugs. This is your brain on drugs.
Just completely scrambled.
Any questions?
Go, Dad. And
Simple, so
yeah.
simple, drives the point home, visually compelling. You see that your brain is scrambled and you're like, okay, you know what? That doesn't sound very good for my brain. So I'd just rather not.
Yeah, and I can remember them also showing the before and after of like a really pretty young girl, and then she's all jacked up. And that was terrifying for me. It was like, I don't want to do that. No way. But as a mental health professional, which is what I used to do for this, I saw the language start to change, where you had, the socialist government encouraging this whole destigmatizing thing of drugs. And then you have agencies and charities that work with homeless people who struggle with addictions, then feeling like they have to change because why? Well, nobody wants to lose the funding. So that's
Exactly.
it's all been pushed, and now everything is okay to the point that we are literally promoting drugs to children at a school event. So backwards.
Yeah, it's so disturbing to see how far we've fallen as a society when this is continually attempted to be normalized for children. And what kind of example are we showing our youth when they see this crime on the streets, when they see open air drug use, when they see people in various states of mental disarray and psychosis, and the adults aren't doing anything at all about it? And so this isn't setting a good example. And then they see this kind of material. They're exposed to it at school, places that are supposed to be, safe places where they're there to learn and trust authority and all of these things. And these children are being entirely misled down a very dangerous and dark path, when we could just bring back some good old fashioned shame and stigma,
Yeah.
and some prevention.
Yeah.
And hopefully stop this proliferation of drug use and overdoses. And then I just want to point to this article that came out today. It's originally by the Canadian Press, but it comes from 650 CKOM. It says national data shows overdose deaths dropped in 2024, but still higher than pre-pandemic because COVID really unleashed a shadow pandemic of mental health disarray on the vast majority of the population. I mean, are we surprised? We told people to stay home and save lives and endlessly shutter and socially isolate, destroyed businesses, jobs, livelihoods, and then wonder why people, were suicidal or turning to drugs and alcohol to quell their stress. National health data shows overdose deaths. As I said, the toll still remained higher than it was before the COVID pandemic. And then a joint statement from the country's chief medical officers of health, chief coroners, and chief medical examiners say 7,146 people died of opioid-related overdoses last year. But one glaring thing that I note that this article is missing is the amount of people who just simply overdosed, because now we have naloxone kits at our disposal. And, the vast majority of people now seem to carry them because overdoses are so common. Is that I would like to know what the actual just overdose, not necessarily people dying, but just overdose rates were, because I can almost guarantee you that that continues to rise, but people aren't dying of overdoses anymore because of naloxone. So big pharma creates the problem. Big pharma also supplies the cure. Every which way you look at this drug crisis, big pharma is laughing all the way to the bank. So this is a little bit misleading, in my opinion. Yes, people might not be dying, but they are still overdosing, and I would say in numbers that are higher than each year previous.
No, you're absolutely right there, because again, when you work in these industries, you see people who have overdosed over and over and over and over and over, and any paramedic knows that. It's the same people, because they're not getting help, they're not getting the proper treatment and things like that. My cat's up, sorry. He's never made an appearance before, but that's my cat. So you're absolutely right. I'd like to see BC's numbers too. And I got to be careful how I say this next part, but I was actually talking with my mom, who, before she retired, she actually ran a recovery program for many years and developed it and everything. And when you do die of an overdose, it's cardiac arrest. So anyways, I just wondered, with the timing of it all going up, I wonder if that has anything to do with it, if anybody knows what I mean about the rise in cardiac arrests in general. That could be a factor, but
yeah, the codes that they implement into the system to note.
I'm talking about the because there was a lot of pressure. There was
right,
a lot of pressure for them to get the jab.
Yeah, well, if you wanted to utilize social services and come into clinics and be involved in a community setting, you had to be double, triple, who knows how many, quadruple vaxxed with the novel modified RNA injections. So, no one's looking at that, of course, Drea, and to even insinuate something there. Yeah, that's just dangerous misinformation that results in measles outbreaks. Okay, before we move on, I want to throw to a story that I did a couple days ago. The original report was from last week, actually, but I had such a backlog of reports, it took me a while to get this one up. But it's a homeless couple who lives in Cobourg, which is where they have recently had a low barrier shelter expansion happen at the beginning of December. So it's been roughly 8 months since this registered charity called Transition House expanded their shelter delivery into this new building. It's named 310. The address is quite literally 310 Division Street, and it's been named the same. And it has been just absolute chaos, disorder, and disarray in the surrounding neighborhood ever since. And the neighborhood had already been subject to crime, chaos, disorder, open air drug use since Transition House opened as a low barrier shelter. I believe it was in 2018. So prior to that, Transition House operated as a emergency shelter, high barrier, or I'm not sure what the actual terminology was back then, because a lot of it has changed in the last eight or so years. But there was a staff attack, and then the building was destroyed partially on the inside. They closed for 8 months. Then when they reopened in 2018, they were designated as a low barrier shelter, and it's been absolute chaos for the surrounding community ever since. So when they were awarded this new building to expand their operation by, I think it was like almost fivefold, they went from roughly 8 to 12 beds up to, it's a multi-level facility now, but they have dozens of people. The emergency warming and 24-hour warming cooling space offers 35 reclining chairs for people to rest in. They're not even allowed to sleep. Anyway, so this couple was there. They were delegating at the Cobourg Town Hall, which heard the grievances of Cobourg residents, because it's the upper tier. It's really confusing politically, but basically the upper tier municipality called Northumberland County is responsible for social service delivery for our 80,000 residents in Northumberland County, of which the town of Cobourg is the largest kind of town center in the county. And so they have been, and Cobourg has been kind of ground zero for this shelter system ever since. And It's the community that's reeling from the fallout of it, not all of these councillors on Northumberland County who keep voting to keep things kind of the status quo. So anyway, the mayor held a town hall about it. You saw some absolutely shocking and disturbing video of what exactly happens around 310 Division Street, including things that their own security cameras should be catching and they should be trying to put a stop to, but it just continues unabated. And this couple here basically details how the shelter delivery in this system is completely broken. No one actually seems to care about getting anybody help and getting them off the streets. And this charity is called Transition House. So they're supposed to offer transitional housing, and that doesn't seem to be happening either. And when I reached out to Transition House, of course, for comment and put these allegations to them, it's crickets. So they can't even attest to or respond to the claims of their own clients that their service delivery is completely inadequate and inappropriate. Maybe we can just play the quick cold open from the one woman, Laura, and their couple with their 2 dogs on the street.
If you go to the street being homeless with no issues, you'll leave the street with issues.
You can't just paint all homeless people with the same colored brush. We are all individuals. We all have individual separate needs, and some of us are special needs.
Yeah, so basically her partner there, Dave, is he is autistic or has some sort of autism spectrum disorder. And what I was really trying to get at in the report was highlighting the difference between homeless and drug addicts, because I think the two often get lumped in together. And that's not to say that one doesn't follow the other, but we can't keep trying to cater to drug addicts who want to engage in lawless criminal behavior and lumping them in with homeless people who, you know, maybe have fallen on hard times or just need a helping hand to get their leg up and actually transition them into more stable housing. And so they agreed. They were like, you know, this is definitely 2 separate issues that we have to address separately, and we can't lump everyone in together and try to, as he mentioned, paint everybody with the same brush. And that's what you see kind of repeatedly happening, and the excusing of criminality and the proliferation of drug use under the guise of like, we don't criminalize homeless people. And it's like, well, yeah, they might be homeless, but that's because they have active addiction and deep rooted and deep seated trauma and mental health afflictions that are completely untreated. So it's really a mess. And it's not the responsibility, sadly, of these small municipalities, townships, and towns to deal with the urban ideals of such a modernized mega shelter in a small town downtown core. It's just not appropriate, and there's not the appropriate services available to people of these kind of needs.
Yeah, and in addition to that, I mean, there's a huge overlap of co-occurring disorders. So if you have mental health, you end up falling into addiction, a lot of people, but they're also lumping in people who are in recovery with everyone else. That's a huge issue too. So you come to a place and you actually change, you want to get your life on track, you've detoxed and all these, and you have to go back to the exact same place where these low barrier shelters are, and there's people high out of their mind, and you're somehow supposed to, you know, get over all of that and stay strong. And that's another huge issue. We definitely need different pockets for different things and different services.
And that was another great point that Dave and Laura brought up, is that there are people in recovery, and then there's people in their rooms smoking fentanyl, doing various drugs. And how are you supposed to stay on the straight and narrow when you're being exposed to that just down the hall? And this model, this shelter model that they have, where we're going to just put everyone under one roof, and a lot of it's based on hopium. They're like, oh, we hope for the best. It's all, we'll just do it and it'll work out, and then we'll pat ourselves on the back. And then 8 months into it, it's like, no, actually, this has caused massive disorder, crime, chaos, violence, put children, elderly at risk and in harm's way. And finally, the county has said, you know what, we have seen the evidence for ourselves after the town hall that Cobourg hosted. And obviously they can no longer ignore it. And so they took steps to immediately close the 24/7 warming and cooling space as of July the 4th. And then they're, and I'm going to follow this closely because the way they word things, you, even with us, the way we word things on YouTube, you have to look between the lines, right? Think about what you're being told and what the person's actually getting at here. So then they're going to receive a report at the end of July to revisit the model of the rest of the shelter and look into making it a higher barrier shelter, focused on those with low to mid acuity needs. So not these kind of complex mental health, active addiction needs. But they're expecting a report in July. So then what happens, right? Is it another month, 2-3 months before actual changes are made? I don't know that the community can stand another several months of this disarray. There are people just yesterday. Now, I haven't been able to verify myself, but I've heard from a few different credible sources that there was a class trip yesterday down to the Coburg beach where one of the students found a needle in the sand. And so this is what we're dealing with downtown Coburg, where you can't even take your kid to the beach or the adjacent parks. And, you have to surveil the sand, make sure everything's clean. I had a post actually I put on X 2 weeks ago when we went down to the park, and I found, a bunch of foil and cigarette butts and various things. And I told the kids to stay clear of one part that's kind of in a little alcove. And then there was other kids that were going in there, and I said, whatever you guys do, just don't dig in the sand because you don't know what you're going to find. It's absolutely disgusting and disturbing. You can't even let your kids play in the sand now without, having to check it over first. And even then, you don't know what you're going to dig up.
Yeah, I'm just going to share a quick, it's just a photo. But here also in BC, like if you have soccer games and stuff, there's usually volunteers that will go ahead and comb the field because there's been so many needles found in certain areas as well. But I shared a picture. This is in Vancouver of the measures they've had to take in the public bathrooms here. They had to lower the actual stall so that you could see what's going on and if anybody's OD'd or what have you. So that's Vancouver. Washam and the Parks Board has made the doors and toilets easier to see.
Jeez.
That's crazy.
Yeah, we're living in bizarro upside down world. I'm just going to throw this quick ad read here that we have from the Canada Strong and Free Network. What is the West's place in Canada? Don't miss this year's Canada Strong and Free Networking Conference. It's happening in Calgary on September 5th and 6th with speakers such as author Tristan Hopper, Lord Conrad Black, Premier Danielle Smith, and Preston Manning. They do have early bird rates available until August the 4th. So you can reserve your tickets today at the Canada Strong and Free.network. So there you go. It's a conservative networking conference in Calgary on September 5th and 6th. You can get your tickets, Canada Strong and Free.network. I think we should just maybe take one more quick ad break, Drea, and then we'll come back to hit the last headliners, the immigration heading to New Brunswick and EB's measles rhetoric.
Do you agree with me? It is time to make Canada great again. And that is why we at Rebel News have teamed up with MCGA hats to introduce, the fashion sensation of 2025. Oh, and by the way, these beautiful hats, they are made in Canada. We don't rely on cheap imports coming over from China. So what are you waiting for, folks? Show your pride. This is the perfect thing for a patriot to wear, or maybe there's a patriot in your life that you would like to gift such a hat. Please go to mcgahats.ca. That's mcgahats.ca. Don't be shy about it. Wear this cap. Let everybody know you want to make Canada great again.
Yeah, and make Canada great again they are, with hundreds of asylum seekers relocating to New Brunswick in the next 2 years. This comes from our state broadcaster, the CBC. Organizations in Moncton, St. John say newcomers could, not that they will or they would, but that they could help fill employment gaps. So it starts off, settlement organizations that help newcomers across the province are preparing to welcome hundreds of asylum seekers who will be relocating to New Brunswick from other provinces to start a new life. Over the next 2 years, about 400 people who left their homes in Nigeria, Haiti, and some South American countries will relocate to cities including Moncton, St. John, Fredericton, and Edmundston. This comments come from Alison Fries, who's the executive director of the Multicultural Association in Moncton, said that this isn't a final number of asylum seekers, but that some could arrive as early as mid-July. And this was the part that really, really drove it home for me. Many are currently living in hotels in Ontario. And some families have been living there for a year, she said. We all think it's fun to stay in a hotel, which, by the way, is at no expense to them. That's us, the Canadian taxpayers, who are paying for their stay up in a hotel for a year. We all think it's fun to stay in a hotel for the first week. But if you've been there almost a year, then that's not fun anymore. I'm sorry. But what kind of privilege is it for you to say, I'm going to have an all expenses paid hotel for a year, and it's just no fun for me here anymore?
It's so hard. You know what? I did the same thing's happening out here in BC, and I did cover some of it happening. I know it's been happening in Richmond. I know it happens in Coquitlam, and I know it happens in Abbotsford. And you know, the one where I went in and actually look, they're in suites too. So they have the kitchenette. It's like literally a nice place. They have a pool they can go to, everything like that. They're driving vehicles somehow, some of them. They have cell phones. Everybody's got a cell phone and walking around. Like, yeah, it's just so hard. It's just so difficult.
And it's like, if you're not okay with that, and this is such a tough life, well, then why are you seeking asylum here? If you aren't fit, you know, if this is not better than your life back wherever you, like in Haiti, then why are you coming into Canada?
Well, and the other thing I noticed when I was doing that coverage is that most of the people I saw were men. I didn't see very many women. I don't know if that's the same in Ontario, but it was just all men.
Well, and this group apparently that's heading to New Brunswick, so good luck to all of you, will be different from asylum seekers the province welcomed in the past, because everyone speaks English or French and has already lived in Canada and is ready. They're ready to enter the job market, they say. So apparently they're different. I guess time will tell. There's, again, a lot of hopium here.
I tried interviewing and none of them could speak English. So I guess that would be different.
Well, they've been in Ontario hotels, living there at the taxpayer's expense for a year. So I guess that makes them be able to speak English. So good luck to New Brunswick. There's a huge reporting gap there. The Atlantic provinces are so, you know, traditional liberal strongholds, I should say, that I think you don't get a lot of alternative media out in that space. So if anybody wants to reach out, what's happening in New Brunswick, let us know.
Nova Scotia to Prince Edward Island, keep us afloat. You guys have to be our eyes and ears. So
all the eastern provinces, let us know. All right, so moving into one of the main headliners that I'm so excited to talk about, we have your Premier of British Columbia, David Eby, saying that the measles spikes across Canada are a result of anti-vax recklessness. I don't know how much more out of touch you can possibly be, because I would wager to bet that, in fact, it's public health and their handling of pandemic response and their vilification of people who opted to take a more wait and see approach than the top down, indiscriminately ordered COVID-19 vaccine mandate mantras we saw unfolding in the country over the last few years, I would say that is more to blame for any sort of, vaccine hesitancy that has now grown than any sort of anti-vaccination. He refers specifically to anti-vaccination politicians. This guy's just out to lunch.
Well, this is one of those minefield conversations we have to have on a live stream on YouTube. So just to be clear for the record, we are in no way going against the public health advice in Canada or Dr. Bonnie Henry's advice. So, but yeah, I totally agree. There's obviously a huge lack of public trust. And it doesn't just spill over to the measles. If you look at the flu stats, for example, because remember, the flu just disappeared during COVID, and then all of a sudden it came back and you needed the flu shot again. Well, those rates have tanked completely, and they tanked even within the healthcare system, which, if you recall, British Columbia was one of the last places in the entire world to let go of their vaccine mandate against healthcare workers. So it was actually healthcare workers who were all COVID jabbed that totally were not getting the flu shot. So totally out of touch, and trying to take, of course, a stab at the strong opposition, the BC Conservatives, who actually in a recent poll are polling at 40, Main Street poll are polling at 44%. And the NDP is polling at 40% as far as who's got trust in them. So out of a touch. You would think at this point, maybe they're starting to realize, there's a lot of people who have regrets. I don't know anybody who regrets not getting COVID jabs. I know a lot of people who regret getting them. So you would think that they changed their tone, but it's the same rhetoric we saw before. And I see so many people cheerleading and on, like, oh yeah, thank God he's calling it out for what it is. It's like, but you guys have been saying this stuff, since 2020.
Yeah. Come on, give us something new to go off of here. But of course, EB's just saying in this article, reiterates, he says the disease is no joke, and it has potentially serious impact of those infected and is preventable with 2 vaccine shots. Now, of course, we could not ever speak against that claim. And we all know vaccination is like the holy grail of science and medicine, and it is immune from criticism. And if you even so much as ask a question about it, well, you are a dangerous anti-vaxxer spreading medical misinformation who causes measles outbreaks across the country. So of course we would never do that, because who would want to be responsible for a measles outbreak? But I would say whoever's interested in learning a little bit more about measles, you could read the package insert, right? You can read the product monograph, what the manufacturer says about their own product. And sometimes the local health authorities, which we cannot question because they also are the holy grail of science and medicine and information.
They look like it too. They really do look like killers.
They are the truth. And you can contrast a little bit what they say versus what the manufacturer says about its own product, and just have a look around, see what you can maybe sleuth out yourself. But I wanted to note also in this article, this is crazy. So in Ontario, the article says Ontario reported its first death in the measles outbreak on June 5th. So that's just earlier this month, when, get this, a premature baby died after being infected in the womb of its unvaccinated mother.
What?
Yeah. Sounds a little bit sketchy to me. So a premature baby died after being infected in the womb of its so the baby was born with measles prematurely?
Okay, after being infected. I thought it was saying died in the womb. Okay.
Yeah, it's really oddly worded.
Yeah, I bet you if we dig, there's something super strange about that. And
yes.
Of course, the baby, unfortunately, being premature, had a lot of issues as well.
Exactly. And so that's the thing you have to look at as well, as the other health factors involved in some of these cases that the media and these local health authorities capitalize on to spread fear and gain your adherence to various things. So, keep an eye out for stuff like that when the way that they word things. And for some reason, I don't know, I was reviewing YouTube's community guidelines earlier before ahead of the stream, and they don't actually include the World Health Organization. And I am a massive critic of the World Health Organization. Don't get me wrong, but they have a vitamin A protocol on their website, vitamin A supplementation, which helps to reduce the impact of measles infection. So oftentimes there is a vitamin A deficiency involved in measles complications. And so supplementation, according here, I'll just share the link here, because I would consider this a local, a health authority. I guess maybe it's not a local health authority, but there are some things that you can glean from somewhere like the World Health Organization. They call vitamin A supplementation an inexpensive, quick, and effective way to improve vitamin A status and reduce child morbidity and mortality in the long term. And so that is also in response to measles infections. So why don't we ever hear about that in the mainstream media reporting that there are other steps you could potentially take, as well as, of course, going out to get your vaccines because they are obviously so safe and extremely effective. You don't hear about that stuff.
No, and you're raising a good point, because I am noticing that our officials will point the finger at the WHO, but really they're cherry picking some of what the WHO is saying. And again, we're strong critics of the WHO, the World Health Organization. But an example, even with the ostriches that we talked about at the beginning, is you have the CFIA saying, well, the World Health Organization tells us to do it. But then when you actually read what the World Health Organization says, in this situation, they would say, no, don't call the animals. It's been past 28 days and they're in their own zone. So yeah, you're raising definitely a good point there.
And whoever, if you want to go look at your own information, go down a rabbit hole that literally involves rabbits, you can watch Protocol 7. It's a documentary done by Dr. Wakefield, who has been embroiled in controversy, don't get me wrong. But I think if you look at the real unfolding of what happened to Dr. Wakefield, you might have a different view of him. But basically, they use rabbit's blood to convey results that were favorable to boost the efficacy of certain products. So anybody who's interested, I did a report on it with Dr. Wakefield, and I think I even linked in there to his documentary. Yes, so his documentary Protocol 7, and that's quite literally the protocol that manufacturers use, like Merck, to boost their claims. So for anybody who's interested, you can also search that out and have a look for yourself. But you didn't necessarily hear it from me on YouTube. Okay, we have 1 minute left. I know we're on a tight schedule because Ezra needs the studio and I have a meeting to get to right after this, but I want to get to our daily dose of cringe. Where is it?
Yeah, we can't.
Oh, yes, of course. So this is Toronto's draft pick. Colin Murray Boyles for the Raptors. This is his response when he found out that he was being drafted to Toronto. Look at this.
With the 9th pick in the 2025 NBA draft, the Toronto Raptors select Colin Murray Boyles from the University of South Carolina.
Colin Murray Boyles sharing this moment with his mom, Yvonne, his dad, Sean, his brother, James, who was a standout at UNC Pembroke and plays overseas now.
I mean, I don't blame him. Toronto's a bit of a dumpster fire right now. I wouldn't want to be drafted into, I live an hour outside of Toronto and I don't even want to go into Toronto.
And sorry, I didn't catch, where is he based? Like, where's he from?
I'm not sure where he's originally from, but You can't, sometimes you can filter your words, but
Yeah.
you cannot filter your facial expressions. And he shook his head and said an expletive when he found out he was coming to Toronto, which, yeah, like Toronto's a mess right now. As somebody who lives in Ontario and who lives an hour outside of Toronto, I don't even want to go into whatever cesspool is happening in that city.
That's pretty funny. Okay, you're from South Carolina, because there's also the anti-Canadian sentiment that is a real thing. It's a real thing right now, so there could be that too.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will wrap this up, I guess. Do we have no super chats today? All right, guys. You'll have to hit us with some tomorrow.
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks so much. Thanks so much, Drea, for joining. And thanks everybody behind the scenes who make sure that the stream runs smoothly. Thanks to all of our viewers at home who watch and support our work. We wouldn't be able to do this without you. And we'll join you back here, same time and place, 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern, for our Friday stream ahead of Canada Day. Actually, I think we'll have a stream on Monday because that's not officially a holiday, but Tuesday is Canada Day, July 1st. So that'll be exciting. And we'll see you all tomorrow. Have a great night.